On the channel before, I've talked about tracks that kind of came together really quickly, maybe in 4, 5, 6 hours. But this was not the case here. This actually took a couple of years to come to fruition. Hey guys, Dilby here. Welcome back to the channel. So today what I'm going to do is walk you through my new track, Darkest Night, which is out now on Ohral recordings. The reason I wanted to do this is because I think it really demonstrates the importance of perseverance in the production process, that things don't always come easy, but it's worth kind of sticking through and making it work in the end. Another really valuable lesson from this is the importance of kind of getting space from your projects. Giving things time to settle so you can come back at a later date and listen objectively. Then going through a process of refining the track and taking out elements that are not necessary and not adding value. On the channel before, I've talked about tracks that kind of came together really quickly, maybe in 4, 5, 6 hours. But this was not the case here. This actually took a couple of years to come to fruition. And that's all part of the creative process. Sometimes it's more easy, sometimes it's more difficult. It happens to everyone. So the track is the one you can hear playing right now, and it's out on Beatport. There's a link in the description if you want to go and grab a copy. It really helps to support me. Other than that, the best thing you can do to support me and support the channel, make sure these videos keep coming regularly, is to click the link in the description to my Patreon and sign up there. Through Patreon, I'm able to offer downloads of the tracks that we work on in the tutorials, so you can get those Ableton projects and you can go through and see all the MIDI, see all the presets and how everything's built up. And that can really increase the level of comprehension and understanding that you get from the video. But for now, let's jump into Ableton and have a look at how Darkest Night was made. Alright guys, so here we are inside Ableton, and this is the original initial project for Darkest Night. This came about in summer 2020. I'd busted my knee and I was laid up on the couch, couldn't make it to the studio, couldn't even bend my leg. So I was just sitting there on my laptop making sketches, and these sketches fed the next kind of few months of tracks that I was working on in the studio. I found this process so enjoyable and so productive that I've actually totally implemented it into my workflow. This is how I make tracks now. I separate it into kind of idea generation and then track completion, where I take those ideas and make them into a finished track. So I'll just play you this. You'll see it's super rough. Basically, I didn't have my plugins installed on the laptop. I didn't have my sample library. I was working with what I had. I definitely didn't plan to be laid up on the couch for a couple of weeks. So lots of Ableton devices, a few loops, nothing crazy. It's just about getting a vibe. And with this track, it was the vocal. I found the vocal and I was like, right, I'm going to use that. So once I was healthy again and I was able to get into the studio, I took it in and transferred the project into my normal kind of working template. And this track actually went through quite a few iterations. It did not come together easily, and I just had to keep kind of throwing things at it and seeing what would stick. Sometimes a track will come together in a day. Sometimes, in this case, it takes about 2 years. But I did really feel like there was something there, so it was important that I kept persevering, and in the end I'm really happy with the result. So version 1.1, this is me just getting back into the studio and kind of refining this a little bit. So developing the themes a bit more, but it's still pretty similar. Version 1.2. Still very similar. These versions represent different sessions that I've worked on the track. When I come into the studio and I want to work on the track, I save a new version, and what this allows me to do is to always go back and always kind of have that peace of mind that I haven't like screwed something up. I can always kind of, if today's session doesn't work out, I've always got the backup of what I did yesterday. Another benefit of this is in the end it allows me to pick and choose different elements that I've come up with in different sessions and combine them into the final product. So version 1.3. So I've kind of refined the melodic themes a bit and simplified the drums. I think at this point I was really trying to nail the melodic themes, so I kind of turned off all of the drums. Version 1.4. So you can hear in there are some melodic themes, some strong melodic themes that made it into the final version. There's also quite a lot going on that didn't make it into the final version. 1.5. So that's kind of developing on from version 1.4. So there, version 1.6, I'm trying something totally different. I've got a different bass line, different drum groove, pretty much different everything, and it didn't work. In the end, I think I listened back through them and I preferred version 1.3, but I took some of the elements of later versions and implemented them into that kind of groove and that theme. So what I'll show you now is the project where I actually finished the first version of the track, the first time I finished it. Okay, so this is the final kind of mixing project of Darkest Night, the first version that I finished. I'll quickly play it and you'll kind of hear it's quite different to the version that was released, but then I'll talk about it a little bit. So you can probably hear it's very similar, but not as refined. There's so much more going on, and that was kind of the problem. Basically, at this point I'd finished it. I liked it, I don't know, I was happy with it, but I'd been working on it for a long time. This was probably early to mid 2021. On this one I'd kind of do a session, it wasn't quite clicking, so I'd work on something else, and then I'd come back to it a few weeks or a month later or something. So all of those sessions that I showed you before, those different versions, happened with quite a bit of space between them. Now at this point I felt like, okay, it's finished. I sent it as a demo to a couple of labels. No one was really interested, no one picked it up, and so I kind of didn't really do anything with it. I had it sitting there in a folder, but I still really liked it and I felt like it had potential, but what I realized is I needed to give it some space. So basically I just left it. I didn't listen to it for a few months, probably 3-4 months. Basically the end of 2021 I revisited it, and by leaving it for such a long time, what that gave me was kind of the opportunity to listen to it objectively, like it was my first time listening to it. I wasn't influenced by how long it had taken me to mix it, or how long a certain element had taken me to work on, and how cool I thought an element was. I was able to just look at it for what it is, and the first thing that struck me was like, there's just too much going on. I feel it's really important for a track to have like a clear, simple theme, and this is just a bit chaotic. There's so much going on in the melodic elements and so much going on in the drums that everything is just kind of washing each other out and kind of competing for space and competing for attention. So what I did is I turned off all of the melodic elements and all of the drums and just kind of went through turning them on, turning them off, deciding what are the core elements, what's kind of the theme, what's the hook of the track. And through this process of refinement, I was able to take it from this kind of chaotic project that didn't really work and kind of just keep the main elements, just the important elements, make sure that everything has space in the mix, make sure that elements aren't competing with each other. And I think the final result kind of speaks for itself. It's got a clear theme. I'm quite proud of the track. I think it works really well and I really enjoy it now. Alright, so this is the final project for Darkest Night. And as you can probably see straight away, it's a lot more refined. There's a lot fewer elements, especially in the melodics and the drums, and the end result is I think it works a lot better. So let's take a quick listen. So it's a lot cleaner, a lot punchier, and the elements that are there have got a lot more space, which allows them to kind of do their job better. They're not competing for the space, they're not competing with other elements for the listener's attention, and that also allows these more atmospheric elements to really kind of grow and create a big impact in the track. So let's have a look through some of the elements that are in there. We've got a kick, which is made up of 2 layers, a top layer, and a more subby bottom layer. So on that kick, I'm using the Ableton drum bus. I think the settings are pretty much default, but I'm adding a little bit of boom here. And this is just to kind of add a bit more sub to the kick in the fundamental frequency. The sub kick is in G, which works harmonically with the track, which is in C minor, and I'm just using that to push a little bit more sub into the kick. And we've got a pretty simple bass line, which is coming from Omnisphere. So together with the kick, and I've got a bit of automation happening here, but I've actually cut away most of it with this EQ. In the previous versions that you heard, this automation was happening and the filter was opening up and it was kind of competing with a lot of the other synth elements. I felt like the automation did help to make it feel like it was kind of evolving and changing over the course of the track, but I didn't really want the bass line to come into the focus. So I've cut off all the high frequencies and left it kind of more in the background, more in the sub frequencies, so it's just really working on the groove of the track. In terms of the melodic elements, the bass does still act as like one of the main rhythmic elements in the synths, and then it's kind of backed up by some of these other elements like this pigments, this mid bass, and this group here, which is one of the kind of main melodic themes. So this is some Wurlitzer chords that I've played using Omnisphere, and what I've done is made a long take, frozen it. So the reason I've done this is you can see like these are all different. So I've got variation in velocity going throughout, so it kind of feels like a bit more natural, a bit more humanized. I've also got some filter automation that I've recorded in live, so it's kind of changing. So that really feels like it's kind of evolving. I've got some chorus, a bit of compression, a bit of EQ, boosting up the mids there, some reverb. Then I've got another layer here, which is just a simple pluck. Just a sample, nothing crazy. And that's just to kind of add a bit more body to the Wurlitzer. So it helps with the attack and helps with the body of the sound. Those are being processed together with a bit of compression and delay. So that and the bass are kind of like the melodic backbone of the track. Backed up with this pigments. So the pigments and the Wurlitzer are doing like a kind of question-answer type thing. The pigments is just a really simple pattern. So I've taken away some of the highs, and the patch itself is called Avalon Strings, and it's just a plucky string patch. I'm using this chord device to turn my simple MIDI into a minor triad chord, and you can see we just play C2, C3, C2. So it's just jumping up an octave. I've got this Atmos sample. Pretty simple, just going all the way through the track. Just got some LFO tool on that to duck it to the kick. I did try having it only in different sections of the track, but I felt like it really adds a lot of atmosphere. And once I'd taken out all of that clutter, it really had space to be there. I'm just automating a little bit with the volume at the intro and outro of the track so that it's not as in your face. This mid-bass sound, and here are the MIDI notes. And I've got a bit of decapitator to add some saturation, stereo savage, which is adding some width. It's a cool plugin, but you want to be careful with it. It can really introduce a lot of phasing issues. On this sound, I'm cutting out quite a lot of the sub, so it's not too much of a problem. Then I've got a Waves H delay set to a half bar ping pong. So next we've got some chord stabs. So that's coming from Diva, a preset called Plucky Saws. So again, I'm using the chord device, and this is the MIDI. So the chord device is just adding the perfect fifth above and below the root note. So this is just playing C, and it's adding in the high and low G. which just helps to thicken up the chord and make it a bit more rich. There's quite a bit of automation going on, the filter, bit of resonance and automation, envelope. So in the break you can see that's rising up. Helping to create some intensity in the end of the break there. As you can see, I did have that playing all the way through the track, but I've turned it off and just kind of used it for this section here, as I felt like the track benefited more from having space than from having this element. I've got this Omni 80s FM. What's this? So this is one of the more unique and memorable melodic themes in the track. Got a patch from Omnisphere called 80s FM Shorties, and then I'm using an arpeggiator to create 16th notes, and then I'm taking those 16th notes with this chord device, they're being duplicated down an octave. So that's playing this MIDI pattern. This element really sits above, harmonically above everything else in the track. It's really in the front, really loud, so it kind of creates a lot of impact when it comes in. The way I got this MIDI is I basically went through the vocal and worked out the harmonic tones that were happening in the different words. So this actually mirrors the harmony of the vocal. So it's kind of reinforcing the same theme from the vocal, which kind of gives it this feeling like it's meant to be there in the track. Those two elements, they're not playing at the same time, but they're doing the same thing melodically. So it really creates a strong theme in the track. I've got an ARP here, which I did have in a bunch of different versions, but in the end I didn't use it. I felt like it was taking up more space than the value it was adding. Cool sound. But you can hear when I turn it on there, it just clutters things up. It's not really adding value, and it's just kind of taking away from the other elements. I've got this epic pad. So that's quite well named. It's pretty epic. It's a preset from Production Music Live. They make great preset packs. I can totally recommend them. And that's coming out of Diva. I've got this spooky pad, which is a sample from somewhere. So simple sound from a sample pack. I haven't really done anything to it. It only happens a couple of times just to add some kind of intensity and drama in a few places along the track. I've got this high string. That's recorded from my Roland JV1010. Got a bunch of stuff going on here. Most of it's probably unnecessary. I've got compression, micro shift from Sound Toys, which is just adding some chorus. I've got some delay and some sidechain. I'm cutting out the lows and mids. I'm automating the volume, so that's kind of rising up, creating intensity. Then I've got this sample here. So in the track, that's quite in the background, and I'm not sure where I got that from, but I guess I found it probably on Loop Cloud or Splice, and I've just kind of cut it up and used it to add a bit of drama and intensity in different parts of the track. It's really not in the forefront of the track, but it does really help to add some depth in those places. Let's look at the vocal. So what's happening with this vocal? I've got the main vocal here.
Is it too late?
And I think this is, yeah, and this is like a higher take.
Is it too late?
But I've just used it on the last bit here.
And in my head.
So it just helps to kind of emphasize that last part of the vocal.
And in my head.
And this higher take is quite a lot lower in volume. Then in the break here, I've used the full take, full higher take just once, as this is kind of like the most intense part of the track where I wanted the vocal to really shine. So I'm using the Waves RVox to add some compression, the radiator from Sound Toys to add some kind of harmonics, a de-esser because the radiator adds like a lot of kind of harshness and high end, sidechaining it, adding some chorus with the micro shift, and then just cutting out some frequencies, boosting up the kind of fundamentals of the voice here. There's a lot of like low mids in the synth elements, so I'm just kind of really cutting away quite a lot of the vocal to leave space for those synth elements. Then that's being processed again, compressed together with the high layer, cutting away even more low mids and some more de-essing. Then those are being sent to reverb and delay. This is just my standard return reverb, so this one and delay, dotted eighth and quarter note, both ping pong. Now, one really cool bit of the vocal, in my opinion anyway, is this kind of glitchy thing that I've made. So that's using a different part from the same vocal. Now what's happening here is it's going through the finger in Reactor, which is an ensemble that I don't own anymore. Luckily for me, I froze it and have got it here. Then that's being sent through Radiator to beef it up more. This beat repeat, which is adding a lot to that kind of glitchiness. Valhalla Shimmer, giving it that big washy reverb effect. And then I'm sidechaining it, and I'm also using the main vocal sound to duck it. Because this kind of decays on quite a lot, I want this vocal to push their volume down when it plays. Now the way this works is really cool. Basically it's a multi-effects device. Unfortunately I can't show it to you, but it responds to different MIDI notes. So I've got this MIDI pattern here, which I guess I've done pretty randomly, and then that is feeding into the finger. And you'll notice that this is over 8 bars, but it's not looping on 8 bars. I've moved that loop marker a bit. So the MIDI is evolving the whole way across the project and changing. And that's why each one of these glitch sections, although it's using the same source vocal, it's actually making different glitchy sounds. So there you go. If you're into that, then I suggest checking out the finger. I'm sure you can get a demo of it. I've owned it for years, and this is the only time I've ever used it, hence why I've sold it. And that's something that I do from time to time. If I'm not using something, be it hardware, software, whatever, I get rid of it. And that process of like refining my plugins, samples, hardware, everything just helps me to have less decisions to make throughout the process, which means that I can make those decisions faster. I've got less options. We've got some effects here. Everything's pretty simple. Noise, 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 you know, nothing too extreme on this one. Nice reverse vocal sound. The effects in this track really don't play like a huge part, they're just helping to reinforce those transitions. Now you notice we haven't mentioned the drums at all, and this is for a reason. So I went through that process of refining all of the synths and making sure that only what needed to be there was there. At that point I realized the drums had the same kind of problem, but everything else was kind of working. So if I just turn off these drums, I really felt like the track kind of had what it needed to do, and the drums just really needed to be quite simple and support those elements that were there. And that's why I've basically just used a few loops. So strong kick and clap, combining those two sounds to make a quite interesting snare clap sound. Then percussion, it's just this clav sample that I think I've taken from a different project or something. You can see from the date on the freeze that it was in 2020, so I really don't remember where that's come from. And then I've got this loop here, which I was using in a lot more of the track, but as I said, like it was clogging things up. So I've just used it in the break. You can see in the break I've taken away a lot of the drums. So it's just this loop here, where I've cut out a lot of the highs and the lows, and it's just kind of providing a background groove, something to keep people dancing, to keep the energy up. That's playing against this loop. So if I take this percussion out, it's really subtle, it's in the background, it's just adding a little bit of texture and interest in that break part. But the synths and the vocal are really intense there, so they're really taking the lead. And I've stripped out everything that doesn't need to be there. We can see here that hats, I've literally just got a couple of loops. This is totally different to my normal way of working, but in this case, I felt like it was just this matter of like refining things down, having only what needed to be there, and this really was enough. Just a couple of simple things that worked well. So there's one more element I want to show you, which is actually the last thing I added in the track, and that is coming from Anna 2 from Sonic Academy. I get this as part of the Slate Digital Everything bundle. It's a really cool synth, and Slate just add and add and add presets, so there's always something new to discover in it. What's happening here, I'm playing some chords, and this is just giving a bit of kind of melodic interest in this break section here. They're quite low in the mix. I'm cutting out the low mids, decapitated to add some saturation, which is actually adding quite a lot. Then I've got the transient shaper here, just taking off some of the attack from the sound, and this Haas width effect, which is just spreading the right and left out and making it a bit more wide. So that's really just there to add some kind of lushness and vibe in the end of that breakdown.
Is it too late now when there's darkness in my heart and in my head?
So I feel like when I turn it off, it's a bit too empty there, and that's a good test to see if something's necessary, if it's adding to the track. So that's about that, guys. That's how I toiled over and finally made Darkest Night.
Is it too late now?
So there you go, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed that and got something from it. As you can see, it's not always easy, and that's the case for every producer. Sometimes you've just got to push through and make them happen. If you enjoyed this video and you're interested to find out more about workflow and productivity hacks, then check out this video I did on beating writer's block. Could be really helpful. Anyway, that's it from me today. We'll catch you next time. Peace.